Hello, and welcome back to my playthrough of Empire of the Sun, South Pacific scenario. We are beginning turn number 5, which is January to April 1943. It happens to be the third turn of this particular scenario that focuses here on the South Pacific region. And for turns 3 and 4, I will put links to both of those playthroughs in the YouTube video. And if you're watching on Pantopo, you probably found it by way of the forum link, and there are forum posts for the Pantopo viewer links there. So I won't go through all the details of what's happened in turns 3 and 4. However, what I will say is that things are not going particularly well for the Allies. The Japanese had a very successful strike on Port Moresby in turn 3, and they have not been able to really gather their footing and make any progress. They did not make progress of war in turn 4. The political will fell by 1 point to 3. We also have the war in China that is going favorably for the Japanese at the moment. And the war in Europe is not going well for the Allies. The Japanese played several war in Europe cards in turn 4. The US did manage in the very last 2 card plays to play a war in Europe card to try to offset that a little bit. But as you'll notice, we have down here some delayed reinforcements with the units that were supposed to come into play on turn 5. So this is where we stand. I'm not an expert at the game. I'm relatively new to the game. I do feel like I'm finally starting to get the hang of some of the game mechanics and just an inkling of strategy. I can say that in turn 4, I may have made a stupid move for the Allies to try to take Bougainville and realize that the Japanese could counter with way more than I was able to bring to bear in Bougainville, and that could have gone very, very badly if the dice rolls were not in my favor. They weren't particularly in anyone's favor, but that could have been a disaster. If you've watched the previous videos, you'll know that I'm using the CDG Solo system that was developed by Stuka Joe to help me consolidate my choices as far as card play is concerned. These are both off to the side for the Allies and for the Japanese. Both sides have 4 cards in their hand, and the Japanese do have 1 Future Offensives queue card. As it is 1943, since the hands are equal and the Future Offensives card is not taken into consideration when determining hand size, the Allies actually go first. So the Allies will now begin the turn with their first card play. Okay, and so to determine that, we're going to roll the fate die and see what happens. Okay, so I rolled the C with the exclamation points. And what that means is that I reveal the card in slot number C, and I can play that card for any purpose, or I can play any face-up card for ops. Okay, I didn't have too many choices. I actually only had 1 other card that was face-up, that was in slot E, and doesn't allow me to do a whole lot. Let me think about what I might want to do, and we'll see. Okay, I've decided to activate the Anzac headquarters and just do a relatively small but potentially impactful air raid on Port Moresby. So I've activated one of the bomber wings of the 5th Air Force along with this Australian unit that was stationed in Port Moresby originally before it had to evacuate. And we're going to do a bombing run over Port Moresby. So now we're going to determine what the Japanese reaction is, if any. So there actually is a reaction card that's visible in the Japanese deck, but I'm not going to play it. And because of the size of this particular operation, I'd like to save that reaction card potentially for something more impactful. So I'm going to take my chances and roll the dice. Now this is interesting. The units that are attacking happen to be just outside the range of coverage for Japanese air zone of control. So I do not get the -2 modifier. Straight up, I'm going to have to make a roll. Because it's OC, I'm going to have to roll 2 or less in order to respond to this. Otherwise, it's a surprise attack. This is what we're going to do. And I did. Look at that. Japanese are lucky. They rolled a 2. So that means that the Japanese do spot what's coming and they can mount a reaction. So let me determine that. Okay, so the Japanese are going to see if they can smack down those Air Force units and protect the Naki, the heavy cruiser, in port. They've activated the combined fleet. That has a administration/efficiency value of 3 plus 1 for the value of the ops card. That means 4 units. And so the Japanese are activating the 26th, the 28th, the 25th, and the 27th Air Forces in response. This could be nasty for the Allies. So let's go ahead and resolve that battle. It is 20 combat factors for the Allies, the 5th Air Force and the Australian Air Wing, against 40 combat factors for the Japanese. So we're going to roll a dice. And the Allies rolled crappily. I think you can see that there. I don't think I need to reposition. 8 for the Japanese and 2 for the Allies. And that will yield us 40 hit points against the Allied units and only 5 hit points against the Japanese units. And because all of the Japanese units have a defense value of 10, nothing's going to happen to them. I can tell you right now that both of these guys are probably gone. So there's 10, 20, 30, 40. They are gone. And that concludes that battle. Let's do some post-battle movement. All right, I've repositioned the Japanese Air Force and the units accordingly to sensible positions, I think. And that concludes that bad result for the Allies. And now we're going to phase over to the Japanese player. Okay, roll the fate die, see what's in store. All right, so we have D or E. There we go. I think that's in focus. All right, so that basically means that I reveal D and E slots and get to choose one of those cards to play for any allowable purpose. All right, out of the 2 cards that I had to choose from, this was the most obvious one to choose. And all of that goodwill that happened over Christmas time to resolve administrative and bureaucratic bickering between the 2 sides of the Allied Army and Air Force, specifically U.S. Army and Air Force, has faded away. So we're probably not even out of January already, and that has gone away. So I'll go ahead and play this for the event, and that will now remove Allied cohesion, and now they're back into inter-service rivalry, which makes it a little bit more difficult for the Allies to continue forward. And now we're going to phase over to the Allied player. The die of fate once again for the Allies. Okay, they get a C again with the exclamation points. I will reveal the card in slot C. And now I will make a decision between slot C and the one other card that's available. The Allies are going to play Tradewind Taskforce, and we're going to play this for the event. We are going to activate the Southwest Pacific headquarters, and we're going to get our 4 activations, and they will come out of the Navy side of things. All right, so here is the plan. I've activated 6 units. I've activated the Southwest Pacific, which I did there. And so we've got 6 activations. I'm sending this Special Forces unit up to take the island of Nauru. And that just will get taken. By the end of this round, that island will be American. There's no reaction that can happen because there's no zone of influence over there. Japanese will lose it. That'll also give me one of the two steps I need to be able to make progress of war. I'm also going to have the 2nd Marine Air Wing do an attack on Buna and that T Army air unit. And then I've decided to take some baby steps. And since New Georgia was unoccupied, I've moved the 2nd Marine and the Washington battleship into New Georgia. The Washington is going to be covering the landing at New Georgia. And I have the 1st Marine Air Wing and the Lexington both covering that landing. Now there's no battle hex there. So there's only right now one battle hex that's been created. There is no battle hex that is created at the moment for the New Georgia invasion. So what's going to happen here is that I'm going to be able to roll for the Japanese to see if there is a special reaction, and then we can then roll and see what the intelligence condition of all the battles are. So let's find out if there is a special reaction. We're going to roll on the intelligence value of the Tradewind Taskforce card. And since I'm playing it for the event, the value is 4. And I did move through zones of influence in the process of going into New Georgia. It was covered already. And in fact, that's a precondition of creating a special reaction hex, is that it has to be in a neutralized or unneutralized zone of influence by the enemy and has to be within range of a headquarters to respond. So anyway, those conditions are true. So it's going to be actually on a roll of 6 or less, the Japanese will be able to create a battle hex. So, okay, so they rolled an 8. 8 minus 2 is 6, and they're not able to do it. So this is a stroke of luck for the Allies. And so that does not create or stimulate a battle. So really the only hex now in question is going to be the Buna airfield, which is being attacked by the 2nd Marine Air Wing. And that's the only battle in which the Japanese could potentially react to. So now we're going to go and check normal reaction procedures and see what the Japanese will do. As it turns out, I do have a reaction card that's visible to me, and this is a pretty straightforward one. This is one of several JN25 code change intelligence cards that Japanese have to change this surprise attack over to intercept. And this will then allow me to activate headquarters and see what kind of reaction I want to do to make the Allies pay for their attack on the airfield here in Buna. So the Japanese are going to respond here with the 27th, 26th, and 25th Air Force units accordingly. And that's going to give them a good chance of potentially knocking out the 2nd Marine Air Wing. So we're going to now go ahead and resolve the battle hex. Let's roll up the dice. Ooh, well, the Allies did really well. They rolled a 9, which is a critical hit, and the Japanese only rolled a 3. Because the Japanese brought so much to bear, they still score 15 hits. So they're going to flip that Marine Air Wing over by 1 step. But the Marine Air Wing only has a combat strength of 8, but because I rolled the critical hit, it allows me then to score 1 hit against the weakest unit. So the weakest unit, they're all basically the same. So it doesn't really matter which unit I flip over. I'm going to go ahead and maybe take out the 25th. So I will flip him over, and then the Marine Air Wing takes a step loss, and that will now conclude that battle. So this wasn't all in all a horrible outcome given the situation. And the Allies also have tons of replacements with air, so it is pretty safe to go ahead and sacrifice air units in the sake of trying to achieve progress. We've done some post-battle movement. The Japanese air units did not have to move at all. They were positioned. I could have repositioned them, but they're going to stay where they started because they were all in range of the battle hex. The 2nd Marine Air Wing, using long-range move, is going to now redeploy itself to Cape York. And that was kind of my original idea. I could have just done a strategic move there, but I thought maybe I would try to inflict a little bit of damage. Now, what happens is that the Lexington is going to pull into port in Guadalcanal, and this 1st Marine Air Wing that was on standby to provide cover to the landing is now redeployed to New Georgia, and the 2nd Marines landed ashore with very little fanfare and have set up shop. And both New Georgia and Nauru are Allied control, at least for right now. This could change. These things are fluid. So that will conclude the Allied portion, and we will now go back over to the Japanese. And now I'm going to roll the fate die and see what's up for the Japanese. Okay, we have this E with a less than sign, and that means that I can reveal up to 2, if they're not already face up, cards on the deck, and then I can choose any event or the lowest ops card. So I'm going to go ahead and play this card, which is the lowest valued ops card, 4 ops. It is a good reaction card, unfortunately, but this is why the solo system is kind of interesting, because it kind of guides you and sometimes forces you into certain decisions. So we're going to do this card as ops. I will go figure out what we're going to do and come back with a plan. Okay, so this move was primarily a logistics operation for the Japanese, moving forces around, getting a better defensible position as far as I can tell. So what I've done is I've shifted the 19th Army into Rabaul. I've taken the 17th Army that was in Rabaul and moved it into Leh. And then I've moved, by ground movement, the 18th Army into Buna. And this is going to help protect those locations against Allied potential movement. And one last thing, as I move the battleship Congo into the port of Kavieng. So there we have it, and now we're going to phase over to the Allies. All right, so now we're going to roll the fate die for the Allies, and just for record keeping, we are a little bit more than halfway finished with the turn. The Allies have 2 cards left in their deck. The Japanese also have 2 cards left in their deck, and they also still have the Future Operations card that they've been holding for a while. So we'll roll the fate die for the Allies. And that is C exclamation point. Okay, so I've decided to play Operation Brewer for the event. Now, this is an interesting card in that the logistics value of Operation Brewer is in fact less than the ops value of the card. And it's one of those rare cards where it goes the opposite direction. Usually you get some bonus in logistics. It does have, though, 2 interesting additional conditions for the play of the event. The first is that the intelligence condition is surprise attack, and this is really why I'm playing it for the event. This means that the opposition, in this case the Japanese, cannot make a dice roll. There is no dice roll. You notice that the EC has nothing there. So it means that the Japanese must play a intelligence card, a reaction card, to change the intelligence condition. So I'm betting against that. And then the second thing is that it does have a bonus called MacArthur's Navy, which is if you're in inter-service rivalry, you can activate a single non-carrier unit with Army units to coordinate. But in this case, it doesn't really help me. So activating Southwest Pacific, and that means I can activate 3 units, and I've done so. And this is going to be an attempt to sneak into Bougainville, perhaps under cloak of night. with the 1st Marine Division and the Enterprise covering, and the Lexington covering from Guadalcanal. It's 2 hexes away, so it's within range. And we're going to see what's going to happen here. Now I'm looking over at the Japanese card display, and I can tell you that they do not. So this will go ahead as a surprise attack for the Allies. So a little bit of good luck here after some bad luck for the Allies. And in this case, I have 16 combat factors, 8 for the Lexington and 8 for the Enterprise, going up against the Kamikaze, which has 4 combat factors. But remember, in a surprise attack, the Allies, or in this case, the offensive player, rolls first and applies damage first before there's any return fire. So I'm going to roll the blue die and see what happens. Okay, I rolled an 8. That's going to apply full value. It's going to be 16 points. That 16 points is going to take out the Kamikaze. The Kamikaze was sitting dead in the port, and the Kamikaze has been sunk. And the Marines land ashore in Bougainville, and there is no opposition of any importance. So now I'll do some post-battle movement and clean up and come back. Okay, so we've finished the card play for the Allies, their successful attack on Bougainville, and I've done post-battle movement, and that also meant I moved the 1st Marine Air Wing that was stationed originally in New Georgia, well, Guadalcanal to New Georgia, it now flew over with extended range to Gilly to project air zone of influence around there. And now we phase over to the Japanese. I'm going to roll the fate die. Okay, and we have D and E. So I will reveal D and E and then decide which card to play for any allowable purpose. So I've decided to go with Operation Ray, which is one of the cards that was available. And here I think I'm going to play it as the event, and I have an idea. So let me activate the units and get an offensive going. Okay, so I've gone ahead and activated units from the Navy. I'm doing an attack here with air power to bomb this 14th Army unit. And I'm going to, and I should move him in there, I'm also going to make a land assault, a ground assault against that unit with the SS division. And the reason why I'm doing that is that I'm hoping that perhaps I'll get lucky and I get a +1 because of elite units as a result of this card being played for the event, since it is a brigade-sized unit. Could be a bad idea, but hey, nothing lost, nothing gained. So we've got the Shokaku that's going to be engaging the newly established stronghold in Bougainville with the Enterprise. And then we're going to see what the Allied reaction is. So there is no reaction card in the Allied deck, so it requires me to make a intelligence dice roll, and this dice roll 6 is the event card roll. I did move through zones of influence, so I get a -2. So basically, if I roll a 9, then this is a surprise attack. So, okay, so I rolled a 2. Americans and Allies know what's coming and they can react, so let's go ahead and see what kind of reaction we can mount. There isn't a whole lot that the Allies can do. What I did do is just to protect the 14th Army unit is I am activating the 1st Marine Air Wing and also sent over the Wasps from Ifate to provide additional air cover to protect against these bombers. And then in order to protect the Enterprise, I decided to send the Lexington out to provide additional support in this battle. So let's go ahead and resolve these battles. And first, we're going to resolve Battle B, which is the carrier battle over Bougainville, with the Enterprise and the Lexington against the Shokaku. And it's going to be 16 battle factors for the Allies up against 14 for the Japanese, and we'll roll it up. Oof. Okay, so 8-1, you can see that. Not a great result for the Allies. And that's going to result in 14 hit points for the Japanese, a full 1x result, versus 4 for the Allies. The 4 for the Allies are going to do absolutely nothing, but the 14 hit points are going to sink one of those carriers. And so I'm going to say, as the Japanese, that we'll go ahead and sink the Enterprise since it was in port. And now we move on to Battle Hex A. And this is a little lopsided, but basically this was to defend from just straight up bombing against a ground unit, which would have potentially incurred loss on the part of the ground unit. So we've got 38 Japanese combat factors going up against 14 for the Allies. We'll roll the dice. And we've got 5 versus 6. So in that case, it's pretty even, it looks like. And the one thing we have to do is add 1 to the Allied dice roll because there was a carrier involved. So it's actually 6 versus 6. So they're going to get a 1x result. It's 38 hit points for the Japanese versus 14 for the Allies. And the Japanese are going to be able to flip over this Marine Air Wing. So that's 10 of their 38. And then they're going to be able to destroy the Wasp. So that's 10. That's 22. And then they're also going to be able to take out the Marine Air Wing. That's bad news for the Allies. And now the ground combat can commence. So in this case, the Japanese get a +1 for the bonus here in elite units for the card, but they're also going to get a -2 because they are attacking in mixed terrain. And so it's overall a -1 versus the Allies who will have no modifier whatsoever. So we roll the dice. Okay, not a whole lot's going on here. 2 minus 1 is 1, and 0 is 0. So the Japanese score 3 points, but the Allies will score 11 points because they are a big unit. And that is going to absolutely flip over the SS unit there. And the other, they're just short 1 point of being able to knock it out. The Allies win the battle, and the SS unit retreats back into Port Moresby. So in that case, that wasn't really great. Thinking strategically, this was basically just interdiction, and maybe not the best tactical move on my part. If you're the Japanese, that probably was a losing proposition against such a powerful unit, but just taking a chance and having some fun. And now we finish the round and phase over to the Americans. We've done some post-battle movement. And one thing I wanted to point out is that that was the last card play for the Japanese of this turn. They have no cards remaining. The Allies currently have 1 card remaining, so that will be the last play of the turn before we wrap up turn 5. So, per usual, we're going to roll the fate die and see what happens. Okay, A, B, and C, and that's a good one. That means reveal A, B, and C and play for any allowable purpose. So I will go ahead and do that. Move a card into the future offensives queue, and it's going to be Operation Dexterity, which is a 3-ops card. And so that will take care of the final play for the Allies. And now we clean up the turn and advance the turn marker and move to turn 6. Okay, we have advanced the turn marker and we have brought on our replacements and reinforcements. One bad thing about the Allies having the war in Europe still going badly is that all of the reinforcements that were scheduled to come in on turn 6, which is the final turn of this scenario, are sitting in the delayed box, and they will not be able to come in. And you'll see the number 7 there. That was my submarine roll. So 7 minus 6 is 1. The Japanese will get their full four cards scheduled. So both sides have 4 cards. The United States did achieve their progress of war for this turn. So at least the political will has stabilized. It's not been a really great campaign for the Allies over these last months, but we'll see what happens in these final 4 months, May to August in 1943. In the next episode, thank you very much.